Ahead of today's presentation of the 2024 appropriation bill to the National Assembly, President Bola Tinubu is seeking approval for fresh external loans of $8.6 billion and 100 million euros. Arise correspondent Omo Bazwaye reports.
According to President Bola Tinubu, both borrowings of $8.6 billion and 100 million euro are contained in the 2022 to 2024 external rollout borrowing plans approved by the Federal Executive Council for the immediate past administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. The president said the latest loans have become necessary in the wake of financial crunch and hardship occasioned by fuel subsidy removal. He said the African Development Bank and the World Bank Group have indicated interest to assist Nigeria mitigate the impact with a sum of $1 billion and $1.5 billion.
Consequently, the required approval is in the sum of United States dollars 8,699,550,000, and for the euro, looking at a total of 100 million euros.
Tinubu said his government hopes to invest the loan in critical infrastructure such as electricity, roads, railway, healthcare services, and other key areas to create wealth and employment opportunities in line with his renewed hope agenda.
I would like to underscore the fact that the projects and programs in the borrowing plan were selected based on positive technical economic evaluations, as well as the expected contribution to the socio-economic development of the country, including employment generation, skills acquisition, support towards the emergence of more entrepreneurs, poverty reduction and food security to improve the livelihood in all the 36 states of the Federation, including the Federal Capital Territory. Considering the huge infrastructural deficit in the country and the enormous financial resources required to fill the gap in funding infrastructure in the face of dwindling financial resources, it has become imperative that we resort to prudent and external borrowing to bridge the financial gap, which would largely be applied to key infrastructure projects.
The loan request was referred to Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debt to report back in 1 week. Nigeria's public debt stock, which includes external and domestic debt, stood at 87.38 trillion naira in second quarter of 2023, indicating a growth of 75.27 on a quarter-to-quarter basis. The latest request is bound to increase Nigeria's debt profile. Omo Bazwaye, Arise News.
Dr. Bati?
Well, it's inevitable that the Tinubu administration will seek the leave of the National Assembly, the Senate, to borrow more money. You will recall that the National Security Advisor told us that they met a bankrupt treasury. You will recall that the Minister of Finance and the coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, also told us that they met the Nigerian economy in a very bad state. Number 3, the Minister of Works, Engineer Dave Umahi, has also just disclosed that in fact the total debt that Nigeria has incurred on ongoing road projects across the country is in the territory of 6 trillion. And meanwhile, revenue is very low. Even the projected revenue for 2024 is 18 trillion. The Tinubu administration is trying to look for money by increasing tax to GDP ratio by about 18%. So, inevitably, they now have to go and borrow. But they plan to borrow, they are planning to borrow 7 trillion. Total of 7 trillion, 7.097 trillion. That's what the senior president read out amounts to. By the time you add that to the existing debt stock of Nigeria, which is over 83 trillion, you are looking at about 94 trillion naira. That would be the debt stock of Nigeria. So the question is, yes, some economists have come onto this program to say it's not a sin to borrow, countries borrow. What matters is what you do with the borrowing. What do we do with the borrowing? We thought the Tinubu administration is saying that, in fact, the loans being requested for now had even been approved by FEC in May, early May, by the Buhari administration. And these loans are being sought for financing several projects in health, agriculture, infrastructure, education, and other sectors of the economy. Okay, so the question is, all the loans that we have been taking before in Nigeria, Nigerians are concerned that the loans, what you see is the debt stock rising. You don't see the effect in terms of development outcomes. We have borrowed up to, we are going to borrow up to 94 trillion, and yet we're told that the roads are not, they have not been fixed. Debt of 6 trillion with federal routes alone. Schools are not in a good shape. Lecturers are not getting what they want in terms of their standing agreement with the federal government of Nigeria. So what do they do with these monies that they borrow? That is the question. Because when the debt stock continues to increase, the Nigerian people are already overburdened. It will add more to the burden of the people. The economy is not productive. There's no real productivity in the economy. How do we make this economy productive? What are we borrowing money for? The other problem also is that if you look at the supplementary budget, in that supplementary budget where the government was asking for about 2.7 trillion additional funding, the controversy was about government wanted to buy a yacht. We don't know the status of that yacht now, although we're told that it had been ordered, it had been delivered. 28 billion was going to be spent to buy luxury cars in the villa and renovate, places within the state house. And Nigeria said, no, at a time that Nigeria is facing serious austerity, government officials must also be seen to be tightening their belts. It's not just the people that will make sacrifice. So these loans, we imagine, of course, that the Senate will approve, given the character of the Senate, as some people have also argued on this platform. But what are they going to do with it in specific terms? Government needs to worry more about productivity. Government needs to worry more about making this economy more productive. Government needs to worry about tightening its own belts and generating more revenue. Not necessarily through taxation, but I guess more through productivity, through investments, attracting investments, which the president has always been talking about. So you can't borrow all these monies and then they will go on luxury items and the cost of governance will rise further. The cost of governance also has to come down. So I think that is the bottom line. And I hope that the Senate will not just rubber stamp the request. I hope that the Senate will do due diligence, take a look at the items, the breakdown, line by line, of precisely what the Tinubu administration wants to do with these additional loans that they are asking for, and to also ensure that there is accountability. Because the major problem in Africa is about the accountability of our leaders in terms of managing resources. This was one of the major points made yesterday by Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, president of the African Development Bank, when he was looking at for Africa to gain more respect. If Nigeria must be respected by the international community, our leaders must be seen to be accountable in the management of our resources, in addition to many other things, creating wealth, creating jobs, empowering the youths, not through palliatives, but empowering the youth by creating platforms for youth-based wealth, where the young people of Nigeria are empowered. So this should not be about rhetoric, and we just hope that members of the Senate will try to apply some rigor in their consideration of all these applications request for more loans, and then the appropriation bill that will be presented before the joint session of the National Assembly this morning.
Okay. This morning, I'm going to say, let's do this exercise together. Fellow Nigerians watching, pick up a calculator, wherever you might be this morning, and calculate this. 87 plus 26. 87 trillion, the debt we have on ground, plus 26, the debt that is proposed that will borrow in the mid-term expenditure framework. 26 trillion plus 87 trillion. That'll give you about 113 trillion. That's where we're still going with the borrowing. Let me also shock you. In the last 21 years, our debt profile increased by over 600%. I'll read a very exciting thing to you this morning. It might shock you. There is a news article from 31st of July 2021 in the cable. It says, from Obasanjo to Buhari, our federal government's debt profile surged 685% to 26.9 trillion in 21 years. I'm sure if you remember, at some point we had our debt forgiven, largely by the Paris Club. When President Jonathan was leaving power, the debt stock was about 12 billion in dollar terms. Today it surged to over 50 billion in dollar terms. That's the kind of country we've built. But in all of this, ask, what did President Buhari do with all the money he borrowed? I'm sure they'll probably show you a rail line. Ibadan to Lagos rail line with all of its challenges, and the train stopping in the middle of the road because of no diesel. Kaduna rail line that we couldn't put in security infrastructure and people were kidnapped and a doctor died and many other people died. I'm sure they'll show you rail lines. What else? They'll say roads, Lagos Ibadan Expressway. Yeah. What else? They'll show you other infrastructure projects. How does this affect the people? What have we done with all the money we've borrowed? We've squandered riches. We've printed more money, we've borrowed, we've increased the debt stock at the detriment of Nigerian people. And that's why we're asking more questions from President Tinubu. What are you going to do with this money you want to borrow now? Yeah, you might claim it's been approved before. What are you going to do with it? Because the supplementary budget the other time was to buy luxury cars and a couple of other things. Don't we feel sad that a position like the wife of the president, we're buying luxury cars for her, is not stated in the Constitution? Why do you need to do it? The president's wife said, oh, we are not coming here because we need your money. We're already rich before we came in here in the first place. They could have afforded their cars. Then we talked about the yachts. Then we all saw what happened. Now we're passing another loan. Is it after the state governors are spending billions of naira on frivolous activities and incurring more debt to the future generation yet unborn? Please humor me. If all these loans we take, if we can see the direct knock-on investment on Nigerians, I will be the first one to say, borrow more. We're seeing what you're doing with the money. But we're spending it on frivolities. And we forget we have to pay back this money someday. And because of the law, we're having a knock-on effect on inflation. Most of the money we printed in ways and means. But remember the inflationary pressures all of that brought, we've not settled all of that. So now, even if we call for debt forgiveness, no nation will take us seriously. Because when they forgave us our Paris Club debt, before you know it, we borrowed all over again. And we are squandering our riches. We're not making enough revenue. We're incurring more debt. The budget, 27 trillion. The revenue projection, and it doesn't mean you are hitting that revenue. It doesn't mean you have, it's just a projection. You can fall far low. Budget performance is about the 50-60% percentile. But what are we doing with the money? Nothing. We just squander it. And what we hear down the line are cases of corruption. Please, the National Assembly should save Nigeria. I know they say the National Assembly is rubber stamp. Scratch that. The National Assembly is copy and paste of the executive. It's obvious that anything the executive says, they just copy and they paste it. But at least, if it is the will of the Nigerian people that put you there, investigate and ask questions. But how will you ask questions in the National Assembly? You remember they approved the 160 million for your SUVs, isn't it? How would you ask questions? Because you're also in there as complicit while the people bleed. Have a conscience. There have been calls for review and even unbundling of the electoral body INEC, as well as reviewing the appointment of process of resident electoral commissioners. The recommendations came at Citizens Town Hall on Electoral Reform, organized by the Joint Committee of the National Assembly on Electoral Reform, partnership with civil society organizations, Yagar Africa. There, the former INEC chairman, Atahiru Jega, advocated the proscription of cross-carpeting, the act by elected persons moving from one political party to the other. Jega denounced the trend, saying it undermines democracy in Nigeria.
We need a transparent process. We need to ensure there is full screening. In particular, we need to ensure that the legal provisions about non-partisanship, about integrity of the people nominated are actually taken very seriously. And the other point I wish to quickly make is that it's also important to unbundle INEC. INEC is saddled with too much responsibility, and this is affecting other core responsibilities of INEC. So the unbundling of INEC needs to be given serious attention.
The police only make arrests where necessary, investigate, and hand over to the Commission for prosecution. We are of the opinion that where the prosecutory powers is also extended to the police who make arrests and carry out investigations, the electoral offenses will be more successfully prosecuted.
We have incremental reforms, but there is an erosion of public trust in the electoral process. Nigerians are asking, why is it that we have reforms year in, year out, but the more reforms, the more difficult it is to obtain electoral justice? Now, this question is being asked by Nigerians is not misplaced, because Nigerians do care about their country, and we care about our electoral process. And I think the presence of stakeholders in this room is a testament to the fact that Nigerians have not lost faith in this entire process. As we prepared for this town hall, a lot of people ask questions, why should we engage this process any further? And this is our response to you, that we have an existing constitutional order, and we believe that there are mechanisms within this constitutional order to self-correct and to reinvent.
Dr. Bati?
Well, I think it's very good that the town hall sessions have kicked off, and Yaga is involved. The Joint Committee of the National Assembly on Electoral Matters is involved. Every election cycle, after every election, INEC does its own review, invites its officials from across the country to look at what went wrong. Civil society also organizes, National Assembly. So we've seen these patterns over the years, since 1991, leading to the 2001 electoral reform process, 2002, 2003. In fact, in 1 year, we had about 4 different amendments, 2006 and all of that, 2010. So we keep having these electoral reforms. The question to ask is the question posed by Samson Itodo, to wit, why is it that electoral reforms do not seem to work? After every election cycle, it's like we're back to the same spot. It's in part because of the lack of political will on the political leadership to make these electoral reforms work. The lack of buy-in on the part of the politicians, who are always perpetually looking for an opportunity to beat the system. The failure of the institutions. But however, the 2023 general cycle of elections, has ended, and now we're back to the same spot, trying to look at how do we strengthen both the electoral framework and also aspects of the Constitution dealing with elections ahead of the 2027 general election. I've said before now that it's a good thing that the National Assembly is getting into this conversation, as they call it, very early, with the hope that a new electoral act and relevant amendments to the Constitution will have been in place long before 2027, and there will have been perhaps opportunities to test some of those things that will be arrived at. This town hall that was just reported was in Abuja. The understanding is that there will still be other town hall conversation opportunities across the country so that we can have inputs from stakeholders, from citizens, from civil society. But as to some of the issues raised, Professor Jega, we should know, he's been chairman of the Electoral Commission in Nigeria. He's also been leader of ECOWAS delegation and other delegations to other elections across West Africa. Beyond that, he's a teacher of the subject of political science. Now, he says INEC should be unbundled. Yes, INEC is part of the problem. In fact, the courts have said so in some of the rulings that we have seen, either by the tribunals or the Court of Appeal. First issue is the independence of INEC. The Waste Commission recommended that the INEC chairman should not be appointed by the president, nor should the members of the INEC board, the Electoral Commissioners, be appointed by the president, because what you then have will be persons that are partisan, overseeing an election in which the umpire is expected to be unbiased, is expected to be completely neutral. A major player in an election cannot be appointing the people who are supposed to oversee the election. That's the basic point. Number two, the unbundling of INEC that Professor Jega referred to is simply that INEC itself has had cause to come forward to say that it is overburdened and has had to call attention to some of the recommendations in the Waste Commission report. For example, the call for a national commission on electoral offenders. Professor Yakubu Mahmoud, in fact, supported that bill and said INEC cannot conduct election and still be the one to prosecute. And meanwhile, if you go to the police, they are inefficient in terms of how they get involved, in the matter. And then there are other issues about electronic transmission, about electoral adjudication, people complaining about judges and all of that, and people complaining about time limit, Section 285, of the 1999 Constitution, subsections 5 to 7. That, look, these election matters should be settled before anybody can be sworn in, so that people can start on a clean plate. And a number of other issues outlined in the advertisement by the Joint Committee of the National Assembly. I think the conversation is useful, and I hope that the National Assembly will be committed to this electoral reform, and that the president himself, when the work is done, will see the need to support the process, because the big fear is that politicians, not just the president alone, others too, who may have benefited from many of the omissions in the 2023 election, may be reluctant to undergo any major reform, which is what Nigeria needs, both constitutional and with regard to the electoral framework.
So one thing has to be said. In the history of nations, when a nation is ready to advance, it has conversations. But when we keep having conversations and we're not true to ourselves in those conversations, then the question is, are we truly ready to advance? I'm really happy about what Yaga Africa did yesterday. I'm really proud of the stakeholder engagement. But please, it should not end there. After the 2007 elections, that the president that was elected from the elections said the elections were fraught with irregularities. He set up the Waste Commission. And the Waste Commission is supposed to be the template. Professor Jega was on that Waste Commission. In fact, it was an extension of that. They used and they put him as INEC chief. And he did his very best. It has to be said that leadership matters a great deal. After 2015 elections, people didn't call for the unbundling of INEC because Professor Jega did a good job. But our leaders have a way of picking and choosing. They passed some parts of the Waste Commission, they left some parts and parts. The most critical part, if we want election transparency in this country, is the fact that the president must not have a hand in who becomes INEC chief or how INEC is run. For most leaders, I dare them to do it. And I dare the incumbent president to ensure that that becomes the order of the day, that the president does not have a hand in who picks the head of INEC. I dare them. I double dare. I triple dare. I will be surprised if they do it. Because why? It benefits all of us. We all remember President Buhari, how he kept on sending back the electoral laws passed in there because of grammatical errors. After I said he was so close to the elections. But once he knew he was leaving, automatically he changed course and allowed things flow. The success of any election will still be incumbent on our leaders in the country. Both who is made the leader of INEC. Yeah, I appreciate the calls for reforms. But if you're on Bodula, they can have multiple commissions and you put suspect leaders, you will have problems with elections. That's why the INEC chairman, Mahmoud Yakub, has a lot of questions to answer, an explanation to make to Nigerians why there was a glitch for only the presidential election, the IRF. Until date, we've not had that him answer that question. Today, I would like to give commendations to a man called Wafula Chebukati. He was the head of the Electoral Commission in Kenya. I stood tall in the last elections. It is in moments of chaos with no leaders. So, if we could have the likes of Wafula Chebukati, we can also have leaders that will serve on the Election Commission and do well. So we must encourage people when they do well. Till today, the reason why Jega is still being called to come and speak about the election was because of his performance in 2015. Take it or leave it. You might not like the man, but he's become a standard for elections. So please, our leaders should do right. The full adoption of the waste report is what we should look at. And the president should start by that clause that says the president must not pick who is the INEC chief. If President Tinubu does it, I will come here and give Sadankata to him.